I'm going to tell you about how the Buccaneers offensive stars are going to be the focal point of this team in 2026. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. I'd like to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listener view every day. I am your host, James Yarcho, writer over at Bucs Report, here with you every Monday through Friday, along with the everydayers. And for that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. The relationship between Zac Robinson and Baker Mayfield went a long way in how this offseason may send the Bucs and Falcons rivalry into overdrive. That's all coming up in a little bit, but wanted to get through some of these quotes from Zac Robinson's press conference that was held on Tuesday. And something that jumped out to me immediately when I was listening to him speak, we've heard a lot of coaches over the years say that they don't force their scheme on a player and, the players dictate the scheme and all of those things. We heard it from Lovie Smith. We've heard it from Todd Bowles. We heard it from Liam Cohen. Every coach in one way, shape, or form pretty much says something to that effect. In this case, though, I tend to believe Robinson when he says it. Now, here's what he said when asked about tailoring his system to the strength of his players. Quote, "I think we all have a foundational belief in what we want to go scheme-wise. Now, offense is ever evolving. You're adapting to your players. You're adapting to your quarterback, your offensive line, the skill group, all of those things. Ultimately, that's what the offseason is great for. Like I said, there will be some great carryover, and there will be some new things that we did in Atlanta. There will be some things that I've never done and they've never done that might fit us. The great thing about offensive football is there's more than one way to do it. I think before you even get to scheme and specifics, it's your style of play. We want our guys to always be in attack mode. We want our guys to play with relentless play, energy, effort, and strain. I think you start there. You want the guys to just love playing the game together. That's evident from what I've watched from these guys over the last couple of years. You start with those things, then you build the scheme and the fundamentals and the techniques after that. Like I said, there's great foundation here with the players, with the scheme that has been put in place here, and we'll just be tailoring and tweaking from there." End quote. I'll tell you why I believe this. It's because I've seen it. The offense in Atlanta did not look the same when Kirk Cousins was under center versus Michael Penix. The offense did not look the same when Drake London played versus when he was out. The offense did not look the same when it was Bijan in the backfield and Algier on the bench versus Algier on the field and Bijan on the bench versus both players on the field together. The biggest one, though, was Cousins versus Penix. There was a notable difference in the plays being called, the route concepts, the formations. Everything changed based on which quarterback was in the game. So when people start yelling and crying about all the times that he ran plays out of the pistol formation, you need to understand that he did that when Penix was in the game because of the limitations that Penix had versus a traditional quarterback that can line up under center and in shotgun. This is why he kept talking about how excited he was to get out there with Evans and Godwin and Ibuka and McMillan, how excited he was to reunite with Baker. There's more layers to the offense that he is going to run from what we've seen based solely on the players that he has to work with. This isn't cookie cutter. It isn't going to be the same in Tampa as it was in Atlanta because he has different tools to work with. You guys know I love my chef analogies. You can't give a chef one set of ingredients and tell him to make something and then expect that same chef to make the exact same dish when you change everything that he has to use. He's going to have to make something based on what's in the walk-in and what's in the pantry. The same applies here. Robinson was asked to elaborate on the strengths of the offense, not including the quarterback. And he said, quote, "You have to start with the offensive line. The offensive line is built the right way. When that group is going, there's no offensive line that you'd rather have around the league. So it starts with those guys up front. I think you look at the skill groups. It's a very versatile group. The receivers speak for themselves. You've got a number of guys that can do a number of different things, and their skill sets all match up really well. I'm excited about that. Then you take a look at the backs. Didn't study bucking coming out because we weren't thinking about taking a running back. But then obviously that 2024 season where he came on the scene, there was a number of things he can do in the run and pass game. Now I'm excited to get to work with him. The tight end situation, they've got a really stable and steady tight ends. I know Cade is a free agent. Those things work themselves out. Collectively as a group, it's exciting as a coach to come in and have that at your disposal. And I'm just looking forward to building this the right way with these guys." End quote. Robinson wasn't taking these interviews just because it was a job opening. He was interviewing because he was genuinely interested in getting to work with these players and because he knew that he could have success in Tampa if given the opportunity. Again, it's going to be similar to what we saw with Liam Cohen in 2024 because both of these guys modeled their offenses after what they did in Los Angeles with Sean McVay. Will it be a carbon copy of 2024? No, of course not. Just like it's not going to be a carbon copy of exactly what McVay does out in Los Angeles. But the potential is there along with the talent to pull it off as long as everyone stays healthy. And that's where things got derailed last year. You started the season with Godwin and Wirfs out. You lose Mike Evans twice. You lose Jalen McMillan in preseason. Baker gets hurt. Gedeke gets hurt. Mount gets hurt. Bredesen gets hurt. It was just relentless, non-stop injuries. The year before, when everybody by and large was healthy for most of the season, you lost Godwin for a little more than half. You lost Mike Evans for a month. But when they were healthy, for the most part, especially in the trenches, when that offensive line, every starter played every snap of every game, this was a high-octane, successful offense. And that's really what their Achilles heel was last year. It was the health of the players. Then you compound that with an inexperienced offensive coordinator, an inexperienced play caller, and things started to unravel as they got healthier. Now you got a guy that has experience play calling. He has experience drawing up these plays. I broke it all down. The All Access members got to watch that. A lot of these concepts are fantastic. But the number one thing for this offense, if the Buccaneers are going to succeed, if you're going to see Mike Evans be Mike Evans, if you're going to see Emeka Egbuka take the next step towards being a superstar in the NFL, if you're going to see Jalen McMillan build off of the rookie success that he had and then the success that he had once he returned to the field, if you want to see Bucky return to that 2024 form, it's all about staying healthy. Because if this Bucs offensive line goes down one by one like they did last year, it's going to be more of the same. And that's not on Zac Robinson. That's not on Baker Mayfield. That's on the health of this team. We know Baker gave his seal of approval for Robinson, but just how big of a role did that relationship play in Robinson's decision to accept the job? That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, it's Matt Derry from the Locked On Lions podcast. The people I love depend on me. If I'm gone, the financial responsibilities don't disappear. I didn't want my family figuring things out during the hardest moment of their lives. That's why I knew only one place to go. I chose life insurance through my friends at Ethos. Ethos makes getting life insurance fast and easy, 100% online. You can get a quote in seconds, apply in minutes, and get same-day coverage. There's no medical exam. You just answer a few simple health questions. You can get up to $3 million in coverage. Some policies are as low as $30 a month. I love the folks at Ethos. Protect your family with life insurance from Ethos now by going to ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. In as little as 10 minutes, you can get the free quote and up to $3 million in coverage at ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. That is ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. Ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. Application times and rates may vary.
There's nothing like being in an NBA arena, the crowd, the energy, the moment. Getting tickets, though, that part hasn't always been so simple. That's why Game Time has become the go-to app for scoring tickets fast. Without the hassle, it puts the advantage back where it belongs, with the fans. I've taken my son to numerous Celtics games over the last couple of seasons, and Game Time is where I always go to grab our tickets. We've gone to Gainbridge Fieldhouse. We've gone to TD Bank. We've landed some incredible seats for even better deals. I love the all-in pricing, so there's no surprises when I get to checkout. Just pick my tickets, head to checkout, and lock them in with Apple Pay. It does not get any easier than that. One of the best things is seeing ticket prices drop the closer you get to tip-off. That's where you can really score some unimaginable deals. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKED ON. That's LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listener review every day. And thank you for making Locked On your number one sports podcast network. If you haven't already, check out the Everydayer Club. I've mentioned a couple of times now that I did the all 22 film review of Zac Robinson and his time in Atlanta. That's an all access only episode. You can only get it by being an Everydayer Club. You get ad-free episodes. You get other exclusive perks. Click the link in the show notes. Obviously, a big story coming out of all of this was the relationship between Zac Robinson and Baker Mayfield. Robinson was on staff, with the Rams under Sean McVay when Baker joined in 2022 for just a couple of months, and famously joins the team on a Tuesday, leads them on a 2-minute drill drive at the end of the game to win on a Thursday night. And that's where Baker's relationship with Cohen started. Same goes for Robinson. When Robinson was hired, we heard the reports that Baker, gave the move his stamp of approval. Turns out he was pushing for Robinson once before, a move we now know was never going to happen because Robinson was going to go with Raheem no matter what. For more on that, Evan talked about it on yesterday's episode. You can go back and check that out. But how much did Baker Mayfield play a role in Robinson's interest in the job in Tampa? Robinson spoke about that on Tuesday, saying, quote, "It's a big deal. We got Baker in 2022 when we had some injuries at the quarterback spot. I've known of Baker for a long time. I went to Oklahoma State. He went to Oklahoma. He diced us up every single time that they played. I had a ton of respect for him from afar as a player. And then to be able to get him in there and see just the type of worker he was, I'll never forget. We gave him a handful of plays. It was a short week, Thursday night game. So we gave him kind of a menu of plays, and Baker could probably tell you about 20 to 25 plays. It was like at 10 o'clock at night. He came in the next day, and I saw his notebook. We had a bathroom break, so I saw his notebook. He had highlighters everywhere, color-coded. Right away, I was like, okay, I know the player. I know the talent, but he's made of all the right stuff. Obviously, that time that we spent together was invaluable during a tough season where he came in and ignited that group. I'm fired up to work with Bake and the rest of the guys. It's a good group of dudes that I'm looking forward to it for sure. Robinson then continued on to say, quote, "Baker was the number one pick in the draft for a reason. In terms of the arm, there's not a part of the field he can't attack. You start there, and then you get to the instincts and feel for the game. You mentioned it. The movement part is huge. You have to be able to move at this day and age in the NFL, as you guys know. His ability to throw on the run, he's probably the best in the league at throwing on the run. He's great in the keeper game, great in the bootleg game. I am looking to evolve that part and making sure that we're playing to Baker's strengths and the rest of the guys' strengths. That's a huge part. The third down conversions, those are tough downs. And when you have a quarterback that can obviously extend those plays and pick up first downs with his legs, that's huge, end quote. I've mentioned this before, but I'm going to stress it again because I think it's worth repeating as often as possible just to make sure that everyone understands. Not everybody's an everydayer, so some people are listening to this for the first time. They haven't heard me harp on this. The relationship between a quarterback and his offensive coordinator might be the single most important relationship in the NFL. If those two don't, at the very least, respect one another and believe in what they're doing together, then the team is destined to fail. This relationship that these two guys already have with one another is going to go a long way for this offense, and it's going to be the catalyst for any success the 2026 Buccaneers have. You can get by if there's a little bit of a rift, a little bit of a difference in personalities between a quarterback and a receiver, or a corner and their defensive coordinator, things like that. But an offensive coordinator and a quarterback, just like a head coach and a quarterback, sometimes they're one and the same. They have to be in sync at all times. You saw how that went in 2023. Even when Canales was going through some growing pains, that relationship with Baker was solid. 2024 with Cohen, it was even better. I can't speak on Grizz last year, but we know early on Baker was excited about Grizz getting the promotion. I don't think, however, that it's a coincidence that as the season progressed and the offense kept getting worse, there were a lot of questions about Grizzard's decision-making and play calling. I'm not saying that there was a loss of respect or a rift between the two. I don't know that for sure. But I can say that the offense floundered and it led to Grizz being fired. Maybe those two guys didn't have the same vision anymore. Maybe those two guys had fundamental disagreements on game plans against certain defenses. Baker was a big reason that Robinson took this job, might be the biggest. Granted, I mean, all the other offensive pieces are huge. Robinson talked about them nonstop on Tuesday. But those pieces don't amount to much if you don't have the right guy running the show. Baker is that guy. He has shown you that he is that guy. There's questions in Miami. There's questions in Cleveland. There's questions in Arizona. You could argue there's questions in Tennessee. They think they have their quarterback, but he didn't do a lot to instill confidence in his rookie season. Baker is a proven commodity in this league and on this team specifically. Robinson knows that. And with the right coaching, this is still a team that can compete, in the playoffs, can make a deep postseason run in 2026 if they make the right moves on the defensive side of the ball. This offense can carry them and lead them to wins that they probably shouldn't get, just simply based on the fact that they have all the pieces to outscore the other team. I mentioned it, I think it was on Monday's show, as the Bengals method. That Bengals defense is one of the worst that we've seen in my lifetime, but they're still winning games because the offense is so overpowered. They can put up 30, 35, 38, 41 points and not blink an eye. That's the potential of this Buccaneers offense. We saw that under Liam Cohen. Now, in 2026, under Zac Robinson, they could be even better. Maybe Robinson isn't as good of a play caller as Liam Cohen, but he's got more weapons at his disposal. You can make up for not being as good of a play caller when you just have more options. As much as I still hold a little bit of a grudge against Liam Cohen for the way he handled things, there is no question at all that he is one of the best offensive coordinators, one of the best play callers in the NFL today. That's why he got the job in Jacksonville. That's why Jacksonville was in the postseason, is because he is that good. Maybe Zac Robinson isn't as good, but this offense can be every bit as solid and reliable as it was in 2024 under Liam Cohen. Could the Bucs and Falcons become the biggest rivalry in the NFC South right now? That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. The last call for football on FanDuel. One final Sunday, one last kickoff, the final chance to get in on the action before the NFL season officially comes to an end. This is Super Bowl 60, and FanDuel is making sure you're right in the middle of it with a special offer just in time for the biggest game of the year. Whether you're backing the favorite, riding with the underdog, building one last same-game parlay, this is the game everyone's been waiting for. This is where predictions turn into plays, stats turn into storylines, and every snap feels bigger. It's the perfect way to cap off the season and make the Super Bowl even more exciting from kickoff to the final whistle. The Seattle Seahawks are 4.5-point favorites with an over-under of 45.5 as they face off against the New England Patriots. Sam Darnold is the favorite to win the game's MVP at plus 100, followed by Drake May at plus 230, Jackson Smith and Jigba at plus 600, and then Kenneth Walker III at plus 850. If you're a new customer, bet just $5 and get $200 in bonus bets if you win. Make it count, because after the Super Bowl, the season is over. Last call for football on FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 60. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Ripping things up here on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. And let me start by saying this. I am fully aware that the Saints and Falcons are the top rivalry in the NFC South right now. Their rivalry preceded the NFC South even being a division, and there isn't much history among the other teams prior to 2002. Now, of course, the Buccaneers famously got their first win in franchise history in New Orleans against Archie Manning and the Saints. All that said, I think the Bucs-Falcons rivalry is about to go into overdrive starting this season. There is a lot of crossover at this point where the two sides have so much history that you can't help but think that this year things are going to get taken up a notch or two or 12. First, you had Baker responding to Falcons beat writer D. Orlando Ledbetter on Twitter after Ledbetter said that Stefanski had a dumpster fire at quarterback in Cleveland and said Mayfield failed. Baker responded by saying, quote, "Failed is quite the reach, pal. Still waiting on a text/call from him being Stefanski, after I got shipped off like a piece of garbage. Can't wait to see you twice a year, coach." End quote. Okay. Then you had Stefanski answer back, kind of. He said, quote, "Baker's somebody that I have a ton of respect for as a player and a person. I love rivalries in sports, and obviously Buccaneers-Falcons have a great rivalry. It's something that I'm excited about, but I would not get into the specifics of those types of things other than to say I have a ton of respect for Baker as a player, as a person. That's a great team with a great player," end quote. So you get the cookie cutter PR response from Stefanski. We still have yet to hear any kind of rebuttal or anybody trying to refute Baker's claims, like at all. Add to all of that, you have the addition of Zac Robinson to the Bucs, likely more coming from the Falcons to join Robinson's staff. We mentioned TJ Yates last week. He is more than likely going to be joining the staff here sooner than later. That adds to the long list of coaches and players that have been on both sides of this rivalry. Dirk Cutter, Raheem Morris, Mike Smith, Warrick Dunn, Rich McKay, Julio Jones. Like, the list goes on and on. But this seems to really be going up a notch or two because of how much Falcons fans hated Robinson and how they all seem to think that Robinson was terrible. So they're laughing at Bucs fans on social media about what a terrible hire this was. But now you have the Baker-Stefanski stuff that is going to make these two teams really start to develop a new level of hatred for one another. You have the face of one franchise publicly calling out the coach of a division rival franchise for the way that things were handled when the two of them were together with a different franchise years ago. So neither one of these two guys is going to be willing to give an inch when they face off twice a year. Now, I'm not sure that this is going to be able to overcome the level of hatred the Saints and the Falcons have for one another. The players hate each other. The fans hate each other. That is just, it's built a little bit differently when you're talking about rivalries in this particular division. And I think that's kind of where the NFC South got the shaft back in the division realignment, is because all these other divisions maintained built-in rivalries. The NFC South was a collection of just other teams from the previous three divisions that happened to be close geographically, and so they got lumped together. So you don't get Cowboys Eagles or Cowboys Giants or Giants Eagles. You don't get Packers Vikings or Packers Bears. You don't get Niners Rams. That kind of history isn't there in the division except for the Saints and the Falcons. I mean, I know plenty of Bucs fans that still hate the Packers and the Bears more than they hate any other team in the NFC South because of the Bucs having played in the NFC Central for so long. All that said, you take a look at where these two teams are right now. And I think the Bucs and Falcons now solidify themselves as the second biggest rivalry in the NFC South because of the people that are connected, not just to each franchise, but connected to one another while working or playing for these two franchises. If it gets to the point where some Falcons players follow Robinson to Tampa, let's say they get Tyler Algier to replace Rachaad White, and let's say a lot of you get your wish and the Bucs get Kyle Pitts. That's only going to add fuel to the fire that started the second it was announced that Kevin Stefanski was going to be the head coach of the Atlanta Falcons. If I was the NFL, I would be putting the Bucs-Falcons on prime time in week 1. You would have non-stop buildup between the two teams from the moment the schedule is officially announced. Baker Mayfield would be front and center of all of it, ready to stick it to his old coach, while his offensive coordinator wants to stick it to his old team and show all of those fans that are trashing him and bad-mouthing him that not only does his offense really work, and not only is his play calling absolutely fine, but now he actually has the talent to execute it. That's going to do it for this episode. Please check out everything going on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at @JYarcho_Bucs, Instagram and TikTok at Locked On Bucs in both of those places. Follow on YouTube with those notifications turned on, as well as wherever you get your podcast. Check out the Everydayer Club and the All Access tier. You can do so by clicking the link in the show notes or going to lockedonbucs.supercast.com. You want to support the show, but you don't want to join the Everydayer Club. It's real simple. Like this episode on YouTube, leave a 5-star review wherever you get podcasts. It does help other Buccaneers fans find the show. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. I want to thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.